Hi all, I am Brad with UnwiredView.com. We have the HTC Thunderbolt here, in-house. And that is the very first Verizon smartphone on their 4G network. So, this is a very special phone to be able to review, and I'm very happy to check it out and tell you how my experiences were. I took it down to Orlando for a little while and played around with it there. So, had some good one-on-one, bonding time, really. So, how was it, and how was the phone itself? We're going to go and answer all those questions and more.
This tiny phone lying before you today is the HTC Thunderbolt. It is the very first LTE smartphone on Verizon's network. This means it is a 4G phone and it's running at hecka fast speeds. That's right, hecka fast. You check out this little guy, and I say little because it is tiny. A 4.3-inch screen on this. I don't know how you expect to actually play around with this and be able to see anything on it because it's so small. And by really small, obviously you can tell it's huge. Holding it in my hand, 4.3-inch screens are massive, and unless you have big hands, it may be borderline too big and too wide for you. So this is the number one thing that you're going to have to check out before you actually buy it. You want to make sure that it actually does fit comfortably in your hand. So for me, I would say I have average size hands, and it fits okay. But if I were to have this be any larger, it would definitely not be small enough for me, frankly. So, 4.3-inch screen, it's a Super LCD display, which basically means you're looking at pretty good colors, very deep contrast, but it's not the best display out there. It's not bad, but it's not excellent, superb, perfect 100%. So just take it with a grain of salt when you're looking at the display. As long as you're not a display enthusiast, frankly, you're probably not going to notice a huge difference, and you're probably going to be just perfectly fine using it the way it is. As you can tell on this thing, it is running off of HTC's signature Sense user interface. This is something that HTC uses on all their Android phones right now. This one is running Froyo, but it will be upgradable to Gingerbread. The rumors are saying probably sometime this summer we're going to see Gingerbread on here, because frankly that's when we're going to start seeing the Evo 3D and the View 4G and some of these other HTC phones that have Gingerbread on there come out and have the HTC Sense built in. So chances are we're going to see that in the summertime. Now, up here we have a 1.3 megapixel camera, so that way you can do video chatting. On the back we have the 8 megapixel camera with the dual LED flash, so that way you get really nice pictures when it's pretty dark. Also on here we see a clever little kickstand. It's actually much like the Evo 4G. If you have played around with that or seen that, then you know exactly what to expect. Ultimately, you take a look at this thing and there's really not a whole lot of difference in the design. Just a few tiny design differences, but overall this is definitely very similar to the Evo 4G. So the big difference is that this is running LTE. Now, the Thunderbolt has a single core 1 gigahertz processor in there with 768 megs of RAM. It is good average for the processing power in here. It's not the most powerful phone out there now, because there are some with the dual core 1 gigahertz and even some that are at 1.2 at this point. So Thunderbolt's certainly not going to be groundbreaking when it comes to the processing power on this. I'm just running an application on here that's just showing off the demo of a game, a 3D game, and you can tell it's actually still rather speedy. Like, it's not having any problems with lagging, and everything renders perfectly fine. It's just with some of the more intensive games where you would want to have the dual core accessibility. So frankly, like I said, the 1 gigahertz, unless you are a serious big time gamer, you're probably not going to notice a huge difference. The single core 1 gigahertz processor has been perfectly fine and runs very well for me, very smooth. So just wanted to show that off really quick. Also with this, the other thing that I absolutely love about the Thunderbolt is that you're having 40 gigabytes of total storage space come out of the box, because it's 8 gigs of internal storage plus a micro SD card that has 32 gigs already on it. It's very, very unheard of for a phone nowadays to come with a 32 gig card already in the box. And frankly, you take a look at some of the competition, first one that comes to mind is the iPhone 4, which has 32 already built in. The difference is that this one, of course, is not built in, it just comes with that card, plus the extra 8 gigs of built-in memory. And if you need even more space than that, or you need to switch things around, you have the ability to put in different micro SD cards and get different things in there. So the big question now goes to the LTE network, because this is the big differentiator on the Thunderbolt. Everything else about this is Evo 4G or Inspire 4G. There's really not too much different that this thing brings to the table besides the fact that it runs on 4G. And you can certainly go in and access the mobile hotspot if you want to and get your LTE signal and be able to tether it to up to 5 different devices. So what we're going to do is now talk a little bit about my experiences with LTE. To tell you a little bit about the LTE network, since this is a 4G network, this means that you're going to get much faster internet downloading and uploading speeds that you would normally see on any regular 3G phone. So with this one, I just pulled up the speed test app, and I was down in Orlando last week to take a look at the LTE network. Certainly there were other reasons I was down there, but I took advantage of the opportunity while I was there and ran several tests. As you can tell, you're looking at here, these are the kilobits per second. So really, you take this and it's 8.3 down, 46 up. I have a hard time believing that it was actually 46 up, because I had a LTE USB data card and it never cut upload speeds like that. So I have a feeling that something weird is going on with the uploading on the speed test app. However, looking at the downloads here, these are certainly much more realistic speeds that you're looking at. There were a few outliers here like 26 and 18, and you may not always get those kind of speeds, but the great thing is you have the potential to get up to that high speeds. These other outliers here, the 430, 9 or 15, that's when I was actually on the 3G network. So you can tell that's a pretty huge contrast here between half a meg versus 3, 4, 8. So really, you're looking at an average of anywhere between 4 and 15 download. And on this one, it's hard to define the upload speeds just simply because I have a hard time believing this. But if my LTE data stick were any indicator, there was never a time that it was below 4 megs going up. But I never really saw it up this high either. I never saw it in the 20s or 30s even, let alone 40. There was one that was in the 50s. Oh, 52, there we go. Yeah, so I have a hard time believing that. I don't think that's quite accurate, but these speeds for the download are actually pretty close to what you would normally expect to see on a 4G. The great thing about LTE is it's getting expanded out to several markets pretty quick here. Right now it's only in 37 different markets, which means there are many of you, myself included, that are not actually going to be able to take advantage of the LTE network at present time. However, Verizon announced last week it's expanding out to over 100 markets by the end of the year. And so you're most likely, if you're in any sort of metro area, chances are you're going to see the 4G show up at your house pretty soon. Now, before we get off the topic of the 4G network, one thing that was a little concerning to me was when I was down in Orlando using the mobile hotspot on the Thunderbolt. I had issues with the mobile hotspot staying connected at all times, and there were many times that I actually connected and it said it was connected without a problem. Like right now it's saying 3G just because I'm not in a 4G area, but it would have the same kind of look where it says just 4G with that same symbol there. And I'm trying to connect it to my computer and it says everything's connected just fine, but yet the speeds that I saw were nowhere close to 4G network speeds, and they were not the same exact speeds that I was getting on the speed test app on the Thunderbolt specifically, and not even remotely close. So there were other times where it would just completely shut off and I would have to restore the hotspot. I know I'm not the only person that's had this problem, because down in Orlando I saw a few other guys that had the Thunderbolt as well having the same exact issues. So it's either something going on with the Thunderbolt or it was something in Orlando. Either way, I haven't heard officially anything from Verizon saying that this is a known issue, so I don't want to scare you on this, but it is something to certainly be concerned about. And you'll want to make sure that if you're going to use this tethering feature and have the mobile hotspot on your phone, make sure it's actually in good usable condition before it's too late. So if you purchase the phone, test it out, make sure it's working good. So with that said, let's move on to a few other notes and observations that I had. With the Thunderbolt being an LTE phone, we can tell it has a little SIM card in there, and it has the LTE radio as well as a CDMA radio. Now with both of these in there, it doesn't actually have GSM, so the trouble is you're not going to be able to use this as a global phone. If you're an international traveler, this is just, it's not going to work for you. The only hope is that you could find some sort of 4G network globally that has the 700 megahertz frequency that it's using. Frankly though, that's almost virtually non-existent at this point. So in other words, don't be expecting to use the Thunderbolt here as a global phone, because it's just not going to be capable. We can certainly see if any new LTE phones will come out. I'm sure they're on their way that would have this global capability, but for all intents and purposes right now, there's going to be some give and take required here. You're going to need the global. Well, sadly you won't have access to the faster speeds because you won't be able to have the Thunderbolt. So again, another big talking point to really make or break the deal there. A couple other things is some good news here. The Thunderbolt actually allows you to talk and surf the web at the same time. You've heard a lot of commercials from AT&T talking about how Verizon phones don't normally do this, and that's true. However, this is the very first one. We presume it's mainly because of the inclusion of LTE that gives it that capability. So that's one thing that's very, very exciting to look forward to if you are getting the Thunderbolt, is having that ability to talk and surf the web at the same time. So we know that the Thunderbolt is a rather big phone. It's got a huge screen on it, which can only mean that everything else on the phone is big too. As you can tell, it's a bit bulkier than your normal smartphones nowadays. It's 13 millimeters, and a lot of phones coming out now, you'll see them around 9 to 10 millimeters. And in an extreme comparison, the iPad 2 and the new Galaxy Tabs are going to be around 8.5, 8.6 millimeters. So that's a huge difference when you're talking 13 millimeters right there. But as I assume, the LTE equipment inside does require a little bit more space, so they had to make it there. It's also heavier than the standard smartphone. Let me offer a couple final key points with the Thunderbolt here, just to give you a good summary of my review of the Thunderbolt. So the Thunderbolt itself is a great device, but there's really no big differentiating factors on this one versus any of the other HTC Android phones out there. Most of the big ones that have just come out, the Inspire 4G is the most recent one, but there's also the Evo 4G and several other HTC phones just all around the world are running Froyo with the HTC Sense user interface on it, and they all come with very similar specs. 8 megapixel camera on the back with the dual LED flash, the 1.3 megapixel video camera on the front. Comes with a gigahertz processor with 768 megs of RAM. And the one thing that makes this really, really special and absolutely love about it is how much storage space it comes with at the very get-go, where it's coming with 40 gigs out of the box. That's impressive. Most other phones are coming with 16 gigs at the max, and then
most of that is usually out of the micro SD card, and then if you need more space you have to buy a whole separate card. So with this one, it comes with the 32 gig card already inside there. Certainly if you need more space you could get it, but for most people 40 gigs is going to be plenty. And another note about this, we have quite a few LTE 4G handsets coming out over the next few months. We have the Droid Bionic, the LG Revolution, the Samsung Droid Charge that is also coming out, and these are all coming out during the first half of 2011. And so, thinking about this here, this is a great 4G phone. It's not perfect by any means though. And what I'm very interested in to see is how this one will compare with the other 4G phones that are coming out. If you have time remaining, you don't necessarily have to get a new phone right now. I would definitely wait just to see what the other options are going to be and then choose accordingly. And hopefully by then, right now this one's running for $249 on Verizon's website and in Verizon stores. Well, maybe this will give a chance for the Thunderbolt to come down in price as well and be more competitive with some of the other LTE phones. So, if you're not in a hurry, wait just to see what else comes out. The phone itself, I never really touched base on the phone itself, but the call quality is okay, not wonderful. There is a little bit of fuzziness that we heard. And so, also you know about my experience with the mobile hotspot, which was not so excellent. And I definitely don't like to scare you with that, but it is a valid concern that always needs to be brought up in these kind of reviews. I try to be as objective as possible in them. So these are just a few things. Again, if you want to check out my full review, where I go into more detail in several areas, go to unwiredview.com, check out my review there, and stick around, check out all the rest of the site too while you're at it. Once again, I am Brad with unwiredview.com. Thanks for dropping by and watching this whole video all the way through, and we'll see you on the website.